this article caught my attention, and the article starts by identifying a list of academics who are writing books, one being Brad Wilcox of the Institute for Family Studies, who's writing a book called Get Married, Why Americans Must Defy the Elites, Forward Strong Families, and Save Civilization. There's also cited in this article work by economist Melissa Kearney. She has a new book out called The Two-Parent Privilege, How Americans Stopped Getting Married and Started Falling Behind. And her book, she makes the point, or she tries to prove the point, that kids with two parents fare better on a variety of life outcomes than those raised by single parents, who she says are overwhelmingly women. And the book, this article kind of goes on and on about this pressure put on women to get married, and this notion that somehow marriage is supreme, and raising kids in a two-family household is going to result in, kids who do better in life in various ways. But then the article goes on to talk about how unrealistic many of these theories are, these authors are, and how these books are not in line with the reality that women face today, and talks about women from all different socioeconomic classes, all races, all ethnicities. So I want to start with you, Dr. Inhorn. You have a book out called Motherhood on Ice, The Mating Gap, and Why Women Freeze Their Eggs. And the women that I know, young women who are freezing their eggs, are freezing them because, contrary to some of these other authors, they can't find a mate to marry, and they're freezing their eggs so that they can later, when they meet someone, increase their chances of being able to have children. So what does your research tell you about marriage and where most young women who want to get married stand today in terms of their prospects?
You are exactly right. I have to say, I started this study about women who had already frozen their eggs, and I interviewed 150 American women from a variety of racial, ethnic backgrounds in this country and from across the country, East Coast, West Coast, and the middle of the country. And the assumption about egg freezing as a technology is that, women are going to use egg freezing to advance their careers, to get their education, to climb the corporate ladder, put off childbearing. So it was very much about the sort of selfish career woman. And that was sort of the assumption. Actually, much of the literature really assumed that this is why women would be motivated to undertake a very costly technology that costs about $10,000 to $15,000 for a single cycle. And so I got a study funded by the U.S. National Science Foundation to really ask women themselves, what motivated you to freeze your eggs? And within the first 10 interviews, it was very clear to me that the popular rhetoric about egg freezing was simply wrong. And every woman, woman after woman was saying, I assumed I would be married. I've been trying to sort of be married. I've been looking for a partner all along through my education and my career, but I have an education and career already. That's not the problem. The problem is I'm single. Mm-hmm. And, I've tried. There was a lot of sort of self-blame, feeling like I must have done something wrong. Why me? It's a mystery to me. I've gone on the dating apps. They're torture. I've tried hard, but I can't find a partner. And women, women who are motivated to freeze their eggs are women who, I say, want the 3 Ps. They want partnership. They want to be pregnant using their own eggs, and they want to be parents. They want to parent together with a stable reproductive partner. But that was the thing that was missing. 82% of the women who I interviewed at the time of their egg freezing, they were single, either because they simply had never had a partner in recent years, or because they had broken off from a relationship. There were divorces, broken relationships, relationships that hadn't worked out. Or if there were 18% of women who froze their eggs when they did have a partner, but the partnerships were so unstable, either the relationships were new or they were not working out, they were very unstable. And even in the stable relationships that women thought they had, the problem was that the partner was unready to have children.
Mm.
So I really said there's a partnership problem going on here, which is really causing this huge expanding sort of sector of egg freezing in our country. And I ended up calling it the mating gap, that women really, they felt they were lacking men who were equal, kind of like them, educated, because these were mostly educated, college educated women, and, invested. I mean, they were equal, educated, eligible people who were eager to partner with them. So it was really a men as partners problem. I mean, not to condemn men, and we should probably talk about this together, but something is going on where men just feel unready to commit to this partnership project that is such a traditional heteronormative value in our country.
Yeah, thank you for putting in perspective why women are freezing their eggs, because you're right. I remember that narrative that somehow this was all about women. We're so busy, we want to have it all. We're going to freeze our eggs because we're going to be at work 18 hours a day. And this article and your research makes it clear, Doc, that this is not what's happening, Dr. Major, that there is a mating gap. So you step in and help us understand that this isn't, something that's just theoretical, but this is real, that there is this inability for a lot of women to find a mate.
It's rough out there, Areva. That's my official doctor's take. It's rough. Right. And it's like Dr. Inhorn said, women are freezing their eggs because their love life is every bit as frozen. Right. When people don't know what to do, they do nothing. That's usually how we operate. We're in that fight, flight, or freeze mode. And the dating game, the love game has shifted so drastically in just the last 20 years. We really don't know what to do. And we will try it once, we'll try it twice. It'll feel like we've tried it a million times because those two experiences were so miserable, and then we just don't want to do anything else. But there is a scary lack of viability out there. The interesting thing is with tech, we feel like there's so many options. I can scroll all day long at possible partners from China, from Russia, from Africa, from all over the world. But when I show up, you have that are you moment, right? You know what I'm talking about? When you show up for that first date, that meeting in person, it's like, are you? Because you can't be the person I saw on your profile. This is not happening. And so there's that part, right? And so women are saying, hey, the options just aren't there. So they're marrying much, much later, if they're getting married at all.
So in light of that, Dr. Major, why are we still pushing this marriage myth? Why are we still promoting marriage as kind of the only relationship or the only way that women should be thinking? And then from there, that's the only way that you should be having children and raising children. And, it used to be this notion that if you didn't have a mate, you were too picky, right? The woman was too picky. But now, based on what you're saying and what Dr. Inhorn is saying, it's not about being picky. Women just don't have choices. So why are books still being written about, quote unquote, the elites, or somehow disdainful of marriage? It's not that people are disdainful of marriage. This article and what the two of you as experts are saying is women who want to be married can't find partners. So why do we keep feeding women this BS that somehow there's something wrong with them if they're not married?
Well, it's the patriarchal society from which we live, right? It was very interesting. I was listening to Dr. Inhorn talking about some of the reasons why women were freezing their eggs, and 3 out of her 4 reasons had to do with them blaming themselves. Well, I must have done something wrong, right? Women internalize this process, and it's really not. And so marriage has long been defined by the patriarchy as a standard for normalcy and stability across all cultures. But what's happening now, what started with our millennials and now with our Gen Zers, they are redefining that normalcy, right? They are redefining what relationships look like for them in terms of types of love or the types of relationship or the types of lifestyles, right? They're normalizing single parenthood. It is no longer, as 20 years ago, there was still some shame that went along with being a baby mama. Now, not so much. It's become more normalized. Normalize cohabitation agreements, normalize these social norms, and it's a different culture that we live in now, right? Because we're in an Instagram, TikTok culture. It's about me living my best life, getting my best shine. Tell me what part of me spent devoting 80% of my waking hours and 50% of my income to some little person who's not me has to do with me living my best life. there's a lot different things going on that we need to come on and get this instant gratification from now. So it's a very different set of standards happening out there.
No, that's absolutely correct. And so, Dr. Inhorn, I'll ask you, when you interview these women who are freezing their eggs because they don't have a partner at this moment and they want to have children later, they want to be parents, were they hopeful that by freezing my eggs today, maybe at age 30, that in 5 years and 35, or perhaps even by 40, that they would have a partner? Like, or are they thinking like Dr. Ish, that maybe I'm just going to go to a sperm bank, have this egg fertilized, and carry this child and be a single parent?
Yeah, they're thinking both, actually. You know, most women who, just to be clear, freezing your eggs, if you freeze your eggs at age 30, those are your 30-year-old eggs in terms of the quality, the quantity, you know, those are your eggs at that biological age. And you can go back 5 years later or 10 years later. And when you thaw those eggs, are actually technically they're rewarmed. Those eggs were your 30-year-old eggs. And so, you know, I think most women are doing it because they still are waiting for that unicorn, that magical mystery man who might be out there. He may not exist, however, but they're looking still and waiting for a mate, honestly. And so I would say most women are still hoping that it might happen. But with egg freezing, I think all women think about option B. Often it was called plan B or option B, which is, well, if I get to age 40 or 42 or 45, and I haven't found the partner, you know, I have those eggs. Am I going to use them? Am I going to be what's now called a single mother by choice? Although I should say it really is single mother by circumstance for a lot of women. You know, they're circumstantially partnerless, if you will. But, you know, women were thinking about it. And for women, it was often like, do I have the economic resources to do it by myself? Do I have the support? Do I have family near me? They were thinking through that. And I think in my book, you know, Motherhood on Ice, I show the great variety of stories. You know, there were women who kept waiting and waiting. Some found a partner eventually, and some women just decided to go it alone, if you will, sometimes supported by other friends. And I found that girlfriends often sort of froze together. There was often like a bellwether woman who would be the first one to freeze, and then she'd get her friends and her sister, and they'd do it together. And, you know, sort of thinking about, as Dr. Major is saying, sort of unique ways of parenting, saying like, we can do it together, you know, in a little community. But still, honestly, most women were hoping to find that partner, that mate. And I actually, in my book, really emphasize a sort of under-acknowledged issue, a demographic issue that we don't talk enough about. But in the United States and in 60% of countries around the world, women are soaring educationally. You know, we should be celebrating how well women are doing in many cases in the US and other countries. And so there's, you know, a growing rate of people entering four-year colleges and universities, and they're mostly women. In the United States now, there are 27% more women in higher education than there are men in higher education. It's a huge disparity, what my colleague John Berger, an economic journalist, called a college-educated man deficit. And it means that in those prime reproductive years, between the ages of, say, 22 and 39, there are 3 million more college-educated American women than there are college-educated American men. And so women who are educated today and always thought they'd find somebody sort of like them, sort of equal, with a sort of college education, same values and so forth, there simply are not enough men like that to sort of go around. And I will say that educational disparity is more pronounced in minority communities in this country. And so I actually had, you know, women in my study talk about that, you know, like, would you be willing to, you know, what my colleague has called do mixed collar mating, if you will, where you have a college degree, but you're willing to sort of be with, say, a carpenter or a plumber or something. And there were women who decided to do that. Like, it doesn't really matter that he's not as educated as I am. He's kind, loving. He wants to have kids with me. But these are the kinds of things women were thinking through, you know, sort of making decisions that maybe they wouldn't have otherwise. But again, to Dr. Major's point, people are coming up with sort of new ways of being. And I will say women in my study had a lot to say about men, a lot to say about men. I have a whole table in my book called 10 Types of Men, a Woman's Lexicon, about the kinds of men that they had encountered. And since you all are in California, I'm going to tell you the term that I learned was the Peter Pan complex, guys who just want to be a man-child. They won't never want to grow up. They sort of want to have fun, play the field, go on the dating apps, have multiple commitments, be polyamorous, wine and dine, but never really commit.
Make that commitment. Yeah, no,
it drove women crazy. It drove women crazy.
Yeah, no, I can imagine. When we come forward, Dr. Major, I want to ask you about that. Has something changed in our society where men just don't want to, as Dr. Inhorn said, make a commitment, and women are looking for commitment? And if that's the case, how do we ever bridge that divide?